Hey everybody, today I'm going to be answering the question, is it too late to become a UX designer in 2024? I've had some people ask me about this recently. There's some people out there who are applying for their first jobs but not having a lot of luck. There's other people who are considering getting into the industry and starting this whole journey, but they're not exactly sure if it's worth it right now because the job market's not great and there's this threat of AI coming in later and potentially taking a lot of the UX jobs away. So I'm going to give a pretty in-depth answer on this. I've been in the industry now for 6 years or so. I've had a lot of insight. I've also been doing a lot of research into exactly what's going on and what the future might look like. So what I'm going to cover is exactly why things are difficult right now, why it may or may not continue to be difficult, and what the future might look like. And then I'm also going to give my recommendations for what to do right now if you're trying to become a UX designer. Now I'll get into why the job market is difficult right now for UX and tech in general. There's a few reasons for this, but the main one is that companies are currently de-risking their hiring strategy. Now, the reason for this is due to the kind of rough economic situation that we've had over the past couple of years. This has happened because we've had very high inflation rates, and that led to the Federal Reserve raising interest rates to fight inflation. Now, these high interest rates have meant that companies have slowed down their hiring because they have less access to money through the money that they can borrow and through the money that they receive in venture capital investment. These high interest rates have affected the entire job market, but they've actually hit tech the hardest because tech is a more risky kind of business. So it has become a little bit less appealing for investors to put money into a tech company. Now, the result of this is tech companies have less money available, which means they can't spend as much money on hiring. And then when they do hire a new person, they're going to be taking less risks on the kind of position that they hire for and the kind of person that they hire. Generally, this means that they're going to have more senior level roles available, and they don't really want to take as many risks on hiring someone without as much experience. This makes it so if you are a new designer trying to get into the market, it's a pretty difficult time right now because companies just are not really considering these junior roles as often. So the unfortunate thing about tech is that we're largely at the mercy of interest rates. When interest rates are low, jobs are usually abundant, and it's tends to be a better time to get into UX. And when interest rates are high, we're going to have a hard time finding jobs, especially if you're newer. The second major factor that hurt the job market was that companies overhired in 2020 and 2021. Some companies even doubled the number of employees that they have. During this time, there was a little bit of a tech boom. There was a huge demand for tech products and interest rates were low. So people were just getting hired like crazy during this time. Then in 2022 and 23, we had our high inflation rates, and that made it so consumer spending went down and companies realized that they just had too many employees. So that caused them to lay off employees in record numbers. Many people lost their jobs, and that flooded the job market with great designers who were looking for a new job. Since there were so many designers in the job market, it made it highly competitive to get the few jobs that were available. So companies really just had their pick of who they could hire. Many companies would hire someone who was more senior for a role that would normally be given to a junior designer. At the height of the layoffs, even senior designers with 10 years of experience were having a hard time just getting any job. That left the junior designers with an almost impossible level of difficulty in finding their first jobs. Then to make things even more difficult, there were many new designers who had gone to boot camps to learn UX when there were these great times happening in tech, and then they entered the job market when things were really tough and just flooded the job market. Those are definitely the main reasons why hiring is difficult right now for UX designers, but I think there's a couple other factors that could have some influence on what's going on here. One of those is that companies are investing heavily in AI right now. So when companies invest in AI, they're largely focusing on the technical capabilities of AI, and they're not really investing as much on the design side. So overall, product design might just be a little bit less of a priority for companies during all of the AI hype that's going on right now. Another lesser factor could be the end of blitz scaling for companies. If you're unfamiliar with this term, it's when companies hire as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, so that they can have all of the tech talent at their company. The rationale being that whoever has the most tech talent is going to be the one who wins in the market in the long run. This strategy seems to be a little bit less popular right now. One of the reasons for this is that when Elon Musk bought Twitter, they laid off more than half of their employees, and the company continued to function pretty well. So other tech CEOs saw this and had a similar thought where they don't really need as many people to be a successful company. It's hard to know if that strategy will continue to be popular in the future. It might just be that due to the rough economic situation, people are kind of forced to follow that strategy at this point in time. Now we'll talk about whether or not these difficulties will continue into the future, making it so that it is too late to become a UX designer. The first thing that would need to happen to have a long-lasting, difficult job market is that we would have to have sustained economic difficulties far into the future. So that would mean that interest rates remained high, companies want to continue running much leaner, there would be no real big tech booms, and there would be less demand for tech overall far into the future. So what are the chances of this scenario actually happening? Well, there's pretty much no chance. So as far as the interest rates go, the Federal Reserve just announced this week that they're going to be cutting interest rates by 0.5%, which is going to be great for the job market. And that's likely going to continue into the coming months where we see about 0.25 to 0.5% cut at a time. Interest rates are always in a cycle of rising and falling, so they're never going to remain high for more than a few years at a time. At least that's what history's shown us so far. And then on the demand side of things, the demand for tech might not be exploding like it was in the past decade, but it continues to be stable. We've become completely reliant on tech as a society, so it's definitely not going anywhere. That should make it so there continues to be plenty of job opportunities in UX once the economic situation improves. Pretty much every software company and many hardware companies are always going to need UX designers as long as there's a demand for their product. The other factor that could continue influencing the job market is the oversupply of UX designers remaining high. As long as there's more UX designers than there are jobs available, the job market's going to be difficult. So is this likely to continue? Well, I predict it's going to get a lot better when the economic situation improves. Many of the people who are currently looking for a job will be able to find that full-time role and make it so that there are less people overall looking for a job, making it overall less competitive. There's also most likely far less people getting into UX right now. Many people have heard about how difficult the job market is, so many people chose to not go start a boot camp or learn on their own. So there's most likely less people entering the job market right now as well. Although it's important to keep in mind that getting into UX is always going to be competitive and difficult. I mean, even when I was getting into this in 2018, it was still very competitive, but any job that's worth having is going to be kind of difficult. Now we'll address the elephant in the room, the thing that has people most concerned about tech jobs being available in the future. And that is AI being able to do the work that a human can far better than a human, thus making it so there's no need to really hire people. So we've already seen Figma introducing some AI features. And people were worried, like, what if there's a version of the future where you can just type in exactly what you need in Figma and it gives you these great designs? That could make it so that a team that would normally be 10 people can just be managed by only one person. Or they don't even need a UX designer in general. Somebody without design expertise could just use a product like this and just receive exactly what they need, like they would normally from a designer, but in far less time and for almost no money at all. So what are the chances of this actually happening? Well, I'll admit, I do think it's a risk to the future of UX jobs, but I don't think it's going to be this complete disaster like some people fear that it could be. So with UX, I don't think we're as at risk as some other fields, like engineering, for example. There's just too much creativity that's needed to do UX very well. AI would need to be much, much more advanced than it is now to take the job of a UX designer. It would need to consider the needs of users, stakeholders, and the business and then come up with creative solutions that take many factors into account. We've seen no indication that AI is capable of doing something like that. It's good at copying things that have been built in the past, but it can't really come up with new and innovative solutions very well. I think AI has the potential of helping UX designers, but it's unlikely that they're going to be replaced. The job just requires too much human-to-human communication, nuance, and creativity. It's important to remember that if AI somehow does take UX jobs, then pretty much any other job out there is going to be in the same position. But then another thing to keep in mind is that the tech industry is notorious for over-promising and under-delivering. So when you hear people in the tech industry hyping up what AI will be able to do in the future, you should definitely remain skeptical. So for my overall outlook on this whole situation, I think that the job market's going to get much better in early 2025. That means it's probably a good time to start learning UX right now if this is something that you're interested in. Once you start developing your skills and you're ready to start looking for your first full-time job, there should be more jobs available. It should get to the point where getting a UX job isn't necessarily easy, but it is doable. The whole process of getting your UX job is likely going to take a while, even during the good times. That's pretty much the normal state of things in UX. Even if this takes you a couple of years to go from first starting to learn UX to getting to the point where you can get a full-time job, that's still a reasonable amount of time to spend getting a job that pays above six figures and is very enjoyable. Still less time spent than going to university, getting a 4-year degree, and then finally being able to get a job. If you do want to get started in UX, I have a few recommendations for you. My first would be to start off by doing something that gives you a structured approach to learning. I would recommend a boot camp for this. That's what I did when I was starting out. It's a great way to learn the fundamentals quickly, start doing real projects, and to get feedback on your work. I'd personally recommend the boot camps from Springboard. They are a partner of mine, so you can use the link in my description and get $1,000 off of a boot camp. But it doesn't have to be Springboard. There's a lot of good boot camps out there. So I'd recommend doing your research and carefully considering which one is best for you. If a boot camp is out of budget, you can also take free or inexpensive courses online and do reading on your own. If you do go with that approach, I would recommend just setting aside a few hours each day to make that time for learning. That's going to make you improve very quickly. And then once you get to the point where you have the fundamentals down, which should be about a few months of making that time for learning, you can then start building out a portfolio. After you've built out your portfolio from either the knowledge you've gained from a boot camp or being self-taught, you likely won't yet be at the point where you can get a full-time job. You're going to need some experience. So to get that experience, I would then recommend starting to do volunteer work. That's a great way to start developing your skills even further and getting projects in your portfolio that will make it more likely that you can get hired for paid work. After you've done some volunteer work, you can either start applying for full-time jobs, which can certainly work, or you can start doing paid freelance projects. For me personally, I went the route of doing volunteer work, paid freelance projects, and then got a full-time job. I think that's a good way to do it because you can talk more about your experience, you can talk about results that you've gotten for companies, and you're going to be a much better designer overall once you start going for that full-time role. If you do want to go that freelancing route, I would recommend using Upwork to find your first clients. That really worked well for me. And I actually do have a coaching program where I teach UX designers how to find their first clients on Upwork. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check out the link in my description. That will take you to an application form, and we can get on a call and talk more about that. But to sum this all up, you need to think of getting a UX job as a long-term goal. Take all the pressure away of getting a job immediately because that's probably just not going to happen, whether the job market is good or whether it's kind of bad like it is now. I think it's not too late to become a UX designer. There can certainly be a great future in this for you if you're willing to be patient and put in that hard work. So thanks for hearing what I have to say about this. If you want to learn more about UX, go check out some of the other videos on my channel and subscribe for more that are coming soon.